Hello everyone, Curious Corduroy here, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be watching an interview with Yoshinori Kitase and Naoki Hamaguchi that was uploaded on the Square Enix YouTube channel. I figured instead of doing the same old where I just kind of show you guys the quote and then you see random B-roll, it might be fun to just kind of watch this as it happens. So we're going to check that out in today's video. If any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below. You guys probably get tired of hearing it. I get tired of saying it, but it really does help the channel out a lot, even just clicking that like button. So let's get started. Here we go.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Jay Curtis. I'm a digital sales manager.
Oh,
here
they
at
are
Square
not
Enix.
mic'd up.
Of course, with me is Megan Health, a digital sales manager. Megan, you have some very distinguished guests with you today. Who's
we
with
have
you?
some friends today. So we have Hamaguchi-san and we have Kitase-san with us today.
So from my understanding, this interview was done early last year, and you can kind of tell because Hamaguchi really seems to like that shirt. I've seen him wear that shirt at so many different events, and it looks super cozy. That wasn't important to the video, I just noticed it.
Thank you so much for being with us. My first question is for you, Kitase-san. A notable aspect of Final Fantasy and just the entire series is that any entry could be someone's first. You know, their first time getting to play through a game, their first time hearing the music. Of course, I would love for everyone to check out 7 Remake, but for a lot of players, 7 Rebirth might be their first time with the franchise. What do you think they should expect?
そうですね、ファイナルファンタジーのシリーズとしても初めての方もいますし、もしかしたらその前作リメイクをやってないで、FF7 っていうのを初めて今作で、プレイする方もいると思うんですけども、今作だけでもストーリーやその、キャラクターなどは本作をプレイするだけでもこう理解できますし、そのゲームプレイ自体も本作で一作で完結するような形で楽しめることができるので、十分このファイナルファンタジー7リバースが初めての方でも十分楽しめることになると思います。特にやっぱキャラクターが非常にね魅力的なストーリータイトルでもあるのでクラウドやセフィロス、そしてアリス、ティファ、バレットなどこう非常に魅力的なキャラクターがいて、それがドラマを繰り広げるのでゲームのね好きな方だったら仮にファイナルファンタジー7をプレイしていなくてもクラウドやセフィロスって名前はどこかでね聞いたことがあると思うのでどんなキャラクターが自分たちが聞いたクラウドやセフィロスっていうのはどんなキャラクターかっていうのを今作で初めて触れる人も非常に楽しめることになると思います。
So I get why they say these things. First off, can you play Rebirth and still enjoy it? Absolutely. The gameplay is incredible, the music is amazing, everything is really well written and acted, the performances are great. The only thing is, if you've never played 7 Remake before, you might be a little lost and confused with the story. They do a recap at the beginning of the game, the story so far, which does a pretty decent job of covering the bigger story points. But of course, there's the little mini interactions in 7 Remake that you miss out on if you don't play it. The little conversations, the cool battle stuff, exploration, the world building. So you shouldn't jump right into Rebirth if you've never played Remake before, because you will be lost in terms of the story. But overall exploration gameplay, you'll be fine. But I do get why they say these things, because they want people to play the game. They want people to buy the game. And if you tell people, no, you got to play this other game first, it's really daunting and kind of overwhelming, and that can scare people away. Kind of reminds me of when Final Fantasy XVI was coming out. They had an entire ad campaign dedicated to, hey, do I need to play Final Fantasy 1 through 15 before I play 16? And the whole purpose of that ad campaign was to tell people, no, every Final Fantasy is a brand new standalone title. You don't have to play the previous ones to enjoy or understand this one. So with that being said, obviously, play Remake before you play Rebirth. But to what Kitase was saying, these characters are very popular. There are tons of people out there who probably never played a Final Fantasy before, especially 7, but they know Cloud, they know Sephiroth, they were in Smash Brothers, for Christ's sake. And when those characters got added to Smash, it was a really, really big deal, because we know that those characters aren't just lent out willy-nilly from Square Enix. It takes a lot to gain their trust, and having someone like Sakurai, who is the creative visionary behind Smash Brothers, who has such goodwill built up with so many people within the industry, it's like, hey, I want to use your characters. People trust him. So it makes sense. But long story short, yeah, they say it because they want people to buy the games. But if you want to jump into Rebirth, you'll enjoy the gameplay, but you really should check out Remake first, just to kind of really understand the story and these characters and really enjoy all those little moments, because they're really well done.
My next question is for Hamaguchi-san. The entire 7 Remake just project is unprecedented. We've never had a remake of this scale, really just in video games at all. And so what I'm curious is, as a director on that project, like, what would you say you learned from it? What are things you're taking with you to really expand on the original game for 7 Rebirth? But then also, are there any specific ways you're going to make this version distinct from 7 Remake from a few years ago?
Final Fantasy VII Remake でのやっぱ成功っていうところは、やっぱりこう FF7 の世界観、特にこうストーリー含めたこうゲーム体験というところをしっかりとこう今の HD のクオリティで
I just want to point out, it's really funny how Square Enix, I think they're one of the few companies out there that still refers to their games as HD games or HD quality games. It always made me kind of laugh. That's a little confusing because everyone's making high-def games these days, but for them to kind of like single that out and actually say, yeah, we make HD games, it's always kind of weird to me.
ユーザーに届けるっていうところがこうやっぱ成功例としては一つだったと思います。当然そこが非常にユーザーに対して評価もされましたし、やっぱりこうミッドガルでの真っ航路を冒険したりとか、ミッドガル内を冒険して最後クラウたちがこうミッドガルからこう出ていくまでのこのストーリーっていうところを非常にこうユーザーに対してこうゲームでもありつつも映画のような体験をするっていうところでは非常にいい成功例だったと思っています。で、今作においてこう当然そこの成功例はユーザーが非常に期待している、特にファイナルファンタジーっていうのはストーリー世界観っていうのが非常に注目されるので、そこに対しての成功例はそのままにしつつも、今度はそこにさらにユーザーに対してストーリーを楽しむだけじゃなくて、今回ワールドマップっていう広い舞台がありますので、そこに対してユーザーがこう自由に冒険しつつも前作と同様のこう濃厚なストーリーも体験させるっていう、さらにこうユーザーに対して、ね、こう進化をしたゲーム体験を付け加えるっていうのが今作のリバースの私の目標でありました。
Yeah, that's basically the structure with this trilogy when you really think about it. Is they've really been building since 7 Remake. 7 Remake was the introduction for a lot of people. It was this franchise coming back after being dormant for so long, and people really wanted a remake, and they finally did it. And we all knew from the get-go, if they were going to turn this into a trilogy or multiple games, Midgar was going to have to be its own thing, unless you start making serious cuts to the story and to the characters and whatnot. And going from Midgar in Remake, which was super linear, which I didn't mind. I like linearity. Linearity is not a bad word or a bad thing. When it's done right, it's super fun. But we all knew that when Rebirth was coming, we'd at least have something that was open world-like. And Hamaguchi has used the term open field before to describe what Rebirth is, which makes sense because it's not fully open world. I think part 3 is going to be the open world game because we'll have access to the entire planet at that point, as well as things like the high wind, more chocobos and whatnot. So that's the natural evolution for this franchise. Start super linear, go into mostly open field, and then you get all the big stuff in the third part. But I love the open stuff in Rebirth. I really do. It's so much fun to explore. But I also really love, and this is how I like to describe it, the cozy linearity of 7 Remake. Being in the slums, being in Wall Market, being, in the church inside of the Sector 5 slums, there's something about being in those kind of open but usually confined spaces that I found really cozy. And you don't really have that in Rebirth because of the nature of the structure of like open world exploration and whatnot. But in part 3, I'm really excited and looking forward to parachuting back into Midgar and seeing what's going on there. What side quests are going to be there? Is it going to be super chaotic? Are we going to encounter people like Nero in Deep Ground? There's so much stuff I cannot wait to see. So again, that just makes sense in terms of like building blocks of remake to rebirth and just kind of steadily going higher and higher with what you do in these games. But what I'm also really curious about is in 7 Remake, Hamaguchi was co-director and Nomura was the lead director. I'm really curious to see like what did Hamaguchi learn working alongside Nomura on 7 Remake? And how did that inform his decision-making for Rebirth? I don't know if they're ever going to talk about that one day, but I think that'd be really fascinating.
Kitase-san, of course you played a large role in the original Final Fantasy VII. With advancements in technology, how have you been able to improve upon the world in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
実績ら進化って難しいですけども、原作の、特にワールドマップはそこまでこうなんですかね、世界の広さをこう表現するために世界全体をある種その普通のミッドガルとは違うこう縮尺で世界の広さを表現する。
Which they definitely do. Everyone has that moment when you play the original FF7. You're in Midgar and you're like, is this the game? It's like, is this what we're going to do? And then you break out of Midgar and you see little tiny Cloud on this big world map. And it really feels like the world is your oyster. You've got the main theme playing overhead. You're getting into random battles on the grassy fields. And then you come across something like the Chocobo farm. And you're like, wow, like I thought we were just going to be in Midgar. But now we've got this big open world to explore. And there are so many secrets to try and discover. So it's really, really incredible what they were able to do back then on the PS1 with, 7, Final Fantasy VIII and IX.
ためにこう存在はしていたんですけど、ゲームのコンテンツ的に何かそこにバトルがあるんですけど、それ以外のコンテンツが詰め込まれていることはなかったんですけども、今作のリバースに関しては何ですかね、原作のワールドマップのこう広さっていう表現をするのはもちろん実現してるんですけど、それに加えて非常にこう密度の高いコンテンツと遊びをこう詰め込んでいて、かつなんですかね、しっかりとそのリアルスケールでの広さっていうのを表現していて、それがシームレスにつながっているという部分では非常に進化していて、それはこういろいろ技術的な部分ってのはすごく難しいんですけども、やっぱ一番大きいのは、浜口詳しいんですけど、例えば言うと、プレイステーション5のその SSD とかの非常にアクセスがこう非常に高速でアクセスできるので、もちろんその原作当時ではできなかった高速アクセスによっていろんなコンテンツが素早い。
Yeah, a lot of people talk about the SSD. Yoshi P and the devs on Final Fantasy XVI really touted the SSD. And if you look at Rebirth, what they're able to achieve with that game is incredibly impressive because there aren't very many open world, open field games on Unreal Engine 4 that run the way Rebirth does. And granted, it does have texture pop-ins. If you play on the standard base PS5 and you're on performance mode, you're getting 60 frames per second, but you're also getting kind of a blurry field ahead of you. It clearly had some issues, but what they were able to achieve, the fact that there's basically no loading in between these open field zones is really, really impressive. There's a lot of pop-in and texture stuff, but you can go from one area to the other seamlessly. That's super impressive. You don't see a lot of games do that without some sort of loading screen or something to mask a loading screen. And I do feel like they capture that moment very well at the beginning of Rebirth when you enter the open world for the first time. Cloud pushes open that door and the sun comes shining in and you just see the windmills and all the animals and the foliage and it's like, whoa, we're back like we were in the original FF7 and now we get to explore. And I will never forget the first time getting into a battle and you hear the main theme turn into a battle version of the theme, which is so well done. It gets you hyped. It's just nuts what they're able to do.
実現してさらにこうファーストトラベル等でこう各地に移動するのも非常に素早い形でユーザーのストレスを感じることのないアクセスができるっていう部分では非常にその技術的な進化によって今回のワールドマップが実現できたんじゃないかなと思っています。
Yeah, again, minimal to no loading. Fast travel is like a snapshot. You get to where you need to go. It's nuts what they're able to do. I don't think people realize just like how difficult it is to make a game like this and to actually have it work. It's all just so seamless. It's astounding. What are they going to do in part 3 when we get the high wind? Because it's going to be truly open world at that point and you won't be able to hide loading or mask loading when you're flying around in that ship. So it's going to be a big challenge, but they seem to be doing really smoothly with the development so far on part 3.
What kind of unique style or point of view would you say you bring to this project as its director?
そうですね。私
Okay, this is what I am excited for. I'm curious to see what he says about being the lead director now and not co-director like he was on Remake. And while I'm watching this, I feel like one of those people on TikTok who's just like sitting there with a green screen as the video plays and they're just like, yeah, they're making good points.
がこのプロジェクトに対してディレクターをやっている意味っていうのは、やっぱり今回って開発ってその原作のこうクリエイターである、北瀬だったり野村だったり野島鳥山っていうところのスタッフはいるんですけど、逆にこうその原作を当時ファンであったこう観点でこう視点で見れるっていうところはやっぱりこうなんだろうな、その観点で見たときにここはやっぱりユーザーから見てやっぱ守ってほしいだろうなみたいなところをこう、まさに原作のクリエイターたちとこうやり取りできるっていうところがやっぱりこう私のこう一番のこう役割だと思ってたので、そこは常々こう開発をしながらもこう意識してというか、注意しながら進めていたところではあったと思います。
That's really interesting because again, Hamaguchi and so many of the younger people who are working on this project started off as big fans of the OG FF7. And if I'm not mistaken, Hamaguchi-san said his favorite Final Fantasy is actually 6. So to see all the love they put into 7, imagine what a team led by Hamaguchi could do with a remake of 6. That would be astonishing. But the one thing I really appreciate about Hamaguchi-san is that he kind of seems to know when to take the fan hat off and put the developer hat on and make those tough decisions of, okay, I'm a fan, but as a developer, is this gonna work? What do? Do we stay true to this? Do we change that? But to have people like Kitase around him, Nojima, Nomura, if he's there, he's a very busy dude. It's really just lightning in a bottle situation where you have all of these great collaborative minds coming together to create this project. And again, I think they're nailing it so far. I'm very excited to see what Hamaguchi has in store for part 3, but not just part 3. What's he gonna do when this trilogy is done? Is he gonna do a Final Fantasy 17 or an 18? Is he gonna do a completely new IP? I'm very curious, but also super excited to see what they do in the future.
When you think about the original Final Fantasy VII, the world is so distinct. People love the characters, they love the setting. It has such a unique point of view. I'm curious, were there specific inspirations that kind of helped you design it? Did all that come from your own head? And then what I'm also curious is for the remake project, were you able to kind of have those same inspirations? Or do you think bringing new people onto the staff, bringing new people onto the team, maybe changed where some of the inspirations came from?
インスピレーション、原作の時は、それが原作の時は、やっぱそれまでは比較的いわゆる、なんていうかな、正統派なファンタジー RPG 的なものが、やっぱり6までは、5まではそれが続いていて、で、6から少し、正統な RPG から若干こう近未来的な感じに移ったんですけど、でもやっぱり6までは比較的王道なファンタジー RPG のこう形をしてたので、やっぱ
Yeah, 1 through 5, very medieval inspired. 6 kind of adopts is it like steampunk aesthetic, I think would be the proper term for it. And then you get even more of that in 7 with like the steampunk around Midgar, but still having like modernish kind of things within the world. You go really far into the futuristic stuff with 8. I love 8 because it has such a great combination of like futuristic, modern, while also stuff from the past. You've got flying schools that are like spaceships. You've got the town of like Timber. I think it was Timber that has like the trains rolling through it. You get a really great mix of all of that. And when 9 came around, that was a real return to the medieval classic Final Fantasy that a lot of people remembered before 6 and 7 kind of came along. But just what they're able to do with these games and make them feel so different and unique has to be really hard.
そこに対してなんていうんですかね、グラフィックスも3DCG っていう技術を手に入れたので、よりこうファンタジーの世界よりはもうちょっと新しいもの、もうちょっと近未来的なものっていうような形でよりそれまでのファイナルファンタジ とは違う脱却したものを作りたいっていうのが非常に強かったですね。で
And I think that's why 7 in particular stands out, is because you didn't really have a lot of RPGs that really kind of went futuristic with their fantasy settings. A lot of it really was kind of grounded in like mages and dragons, and you still had that stuff in 7, but it was more of like the steampunk FF7 variety kind of thing.
なんですかね。それまではファンタジーの世界だったら、例えば敵は
Dragons
モンスターだったものを、まあ、現代に置き換えた時には何かこう、巨大企業的な、こう、悪の企業みたいな風にこう。
Yeah, Shinra Electric Power Company. Like, you wouldn't have had a Shinra in the previous Final Fantasies. You would have had evil empires, but to have something that is very modern, like a power company, which is sucking up the planet's resources, naturally you're going to have, you know, characters that are eco-terrorists that want to stop that. So your big bad's kind of more from like the evil king or jester kind of character to like a big corporation with like a Nepo baby leading the charge and all that, but also the monsters. Tank Ceratops, man. You're not going to have a Tank Ceratops in any other fantasy game other than Final Fantasy VII.
敵を置き換えたりとか、もしくはその、まあ、魔法の世界であれば魔法だったり、その不思議な力だったりっていうものが、よりこう現代的なこうエネルギー、魔法というエネルギーみたいに置き換えたりとかっていう部分のこう古いクラシックな RPG の要素をこう現代的なものに置き換えるっていう作業はこう楽しかったですね。で、普通のリバースに関してはもう天口を中心とした開発チームに任せているので、まあまあ僕の方から何かインスピレーションがないんですけど、一つだけこうなんだろうな、浜口ではなくて。こう背景のエンバイロメントを担当している三宅貴子さんに言ったのは原作ではその魔法エネルギーで成り立っている世界という設定があったんですけど、そのなんだろうな個人的にはその魔法が世界を支えているっていう描写がまだ足りない部分があると思ってたので、その辺をこうしっかりとこう今作のリメイクプロジェクト全体ではその背景のそのデザインの中でもうちょっとそれを示してくれないかと思ってたので、結構カーブのそのところにパイプが魔法を供給するパイプがつながったりとか、そういう描写は原作に比べて結構増えてるので、よりその魔法で支えられた世界っていうのがこうビジュアルで表現されるようになったっていう部分は非常に僕の中で喜んでいますというか満足しています。
Yeah, in the original, obviously with technical limitations, I think I'm having a stroke. Technical limitations. You're not going to have big Mako pipes just kind of bursting from the ground. I mean, look at like the weapons when they show up. You got Ruby weapon that shows up and it's just like peeking out of the desert. Emerald weapon is just kind of floating there in the ocean. So while you still get the effect in the original of like, hey, this company is bleeding the planet dry, you see it way more in the remake trilogy. Rebirth in particular, like Kitase said, those pipes going from calm out into the actual open world, just sucking up resources. Even the gold saucer. There's that really great scene where Cloud and Barrett are going to the haunted hotel to, book rooms for the party. And Barrett has this crash out moment where he sees all of this stuff being powered by Mako. And he's like, really? Like, this is what we're doing. We're sucking the energy from this planet for this shit. And they do a really good job of just showcasing like Mako. Everyone's using Mako. It's getting dried up. What are we doing?
Hamaguchi-san, I imagine it's very cool and maybe just a little bit stressful to work with so many people who, made the original Final Fantasy VII. I'm curious, how does that affect maybe changes, maybe new mechanics, additions to the game you might add now in Rebirth? Do you ever feel hesitant to change the original vision, or do you just kind of go your own path, or are you always checking with Kitase-san to make sure something's okay before you make any core changes to the game?
そういう意味だと、今作のリメイクプロジェクト全体の作品に対して私の中で一つポリシーがあって、先ほどの質問でも私自身が原作 FF7 のファンであり、その観点からクリエイティブをしたいっていう時に、今回のこのリメイク作品っていうのはやっぱ原作に関わってた、クリエイターたちが満たしたかったことを、その当時できなかったことを こう今の時代にもう一回再創作してあげるっていうことがこのプロジェクトの成功というかこう正しい道だと私はこう考えているので、こう彼らがこう原作当時作ろうとしてる時にそのどのそのなんだろうなこうエンターテインメントのエッセンスというかそのどのポイントをすごく重要視していたのかっていうのはこうどのパートにおいても非常にこう注意してたというかこう気をつけていて、そういう意味で近くにここのところのこう遊びのところってそもそも何がさせたかったのかとかどういうことをしたかったのかみたいなのがすぐ近くに聞ける存在としていたっていうのはやっぱり非常に心強かったです。
Yeah, so again, with Hamaguchi being a fan, it's like, okay, he knows already what important moments need to stay in the game, where they can take deviations. I think one of the biggest examples is in 7 Remake, and it's the honeybee and stuff. Leading up to 7 Remake, there were so many people who are like, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do honeybee in. They're not going to have Cloud in a dress. He's not going to get the silk underwear and the perfume. And they did it. And it was done really well. It was actually handled in a way that I thought was super respectful of the message they were trying to send with that section of the game where you meet Andrea, and I forget the actual dialogue, but he's basically telling Cloud, like, don't be afraid to be yourself. Like, be your true self, live your life as who you are. Really beautiful message. So they were able to take something from the original, update it in a way that works. You still got the same effect as the original of Cloud being super uncomfortable dressing as a woman because it's for a bigger purpose of we got to find Tifa. But you also get this really beautiful message that goes along with it. We've also seen other interviews where the scenario writer Nojima has talked about getting the opportunity to really kind of flesh out all of the other things that they had in the original game that maybe he didn't have a chance to really expand upon, or maybe they didn't have the technical ability to expand upon. So to have those people still around you, having the knowledge of being a fan, I think really kind of is what really helps this project in particular. And I really feel like it's in good hands. For me personally, I don't feel like they've really messed up a lot in this trilogy, and I have faith in what they continue to do.
じゃあそういうこうFF7 をこうなすその要素というかエッセンスみたいなものはこう決まったとしたときに、じゃあそれをじゃあ今のこう時代にこう変化するときにじゃあこう細かく確認をしてたかというと、そこはもうある意味こう北瀬にしろ野村にしろこう今回のこのクリエイティブなところに関しては非常に私を信頼して任せてくれたところがあったので、逆にこう新しいこう今の時代のクリエイターが今この時代で再創作するっていうことをやっぱり私に託してくれたからこそ今私がディレクターという立場にいるので、そこに関してはもう正直今のクリエイターたちと議論をしてもう決めていったので、そこに対して、ね、特になんだかんだ言われることもなく、もうそこは本当に預けてくれたので、逆にそういう意味で言うと非常にやりやすい部分もありつつも、責任感も感じつつ非常に緊張感も持ってやれたので、そういう意味で非常にいい作品に仕上がれたのかなっていう思いもあります。
That's the thing. They know what they're doing. They're not going to pull a Star Wars with this and just make a movie, see how it turns out, and then not have a plan moving forward. And then the second movie is very different from what the first movie sets up. And then the third movie retcons things that the second movie did in terms of like the new Star Wars trilogy. They know what they're doing with the 7 Remake trilogy. They know what the roadmap is. They know what the big moments are. They know where to stay true, where to deviate, and how to update in a way that works. I feel like a crazy person, but it works.
Kitase-san, the characters are such a big part of why the original Final Fantasy VII story has endured for so long. Some people still have arguments surrounding Tifa and Eric to this day. Where do you...
Oh, God. The shipping stuff, oh my lord, man. It makes my head hurt. I stay away from it because I think it's ridiculous. I'll say what I said in previous videos. If you like shipping, you have a certain, pairing of characters you love, that's great. That's wonderful. You want to write about it. You want to talk about it. That's totally fine. When you cross the line and you start attacking people, whether they're developers, the actors involved, or other fans, that's when you got to take a step back and realize, hey, you're getting too far into this. You're crashing out. The stuff you're doing is incredibly inappropriate. So I try my best to stay away from that. I don't ship anybody. I just, watch the story as it unfolds. I have favorite characters and whatnot, but the whole idea of like, no, Cloud should be with this person, not this person, and this character sucks, and if you like them, you're a duty head. It's insane. I'll step off my soapbox.
How do you draw the line between letting characters tell their own unique spin on these classic characters versus telling a more defined story?
そういう意味ではもちろん作り手として、もちろんキャラクターってやっぱシナリオからそのキャラクターを描くキャラクターをキャラクター作りをするっていうのはそこから始まるんですけど、作り手としてはそういった意味ではそのキャラクターの全部の魅力を伝えたいという思いでそういう意味では制作者の思うキャラクター作りっていうのをやっぱりもちろん作ってる段階ではするんですけど、一度その作品が世に出てしまうと、それこそ原作の時もそうですし FF7 リメイクにした時もそうですけど、一度の作品が世に出た以降っていうのはやっぱりファンの皆さん、プレイヤーの方がそこをどう感じたりとか、どうそのストーリーではゲームでは描かれてない部分も含めてどう想像してもらえるかっていうのはやっぱりプレイヤーのそれぞれのプレイヤーがやっぱ自由ではあるので、そこは作る段階では 100% パーフェクトに描いてるつもりですけど、それ以上のプレイした方がそれ以上の解釈とかいろんな部分を思うのは自由だと思ってるので、そこはそういう思いでいます。
Yeah, they do already such a great job of writing these characters and what their interpretation is. The actors do a wonderful job bringing them to life. You get so much more in Rebirth and Remake in regards to the character personalities. A moment that I point at sometimes in Rebirth is when you're in the corral area, the beach area, and you're doing the mission for jewels to get rid of all the monsters around the gym. And Cloud and Tifa are just kind of having this conversation about food. You wouldn't normally have a conversation like that in these games, especially the older ones. There wasn't really a way to tell that kind of story. And they're just talking about how, yeah, when we were younger, we had it really good because we had good food, people cooking for us. Tifa's talking about the menu at the Seventh Heaven bar and what she wants to put on it and how half of the menu was hers. So we get a really good picture of who these characters are. And then, of course, once it's out in the world, people really just kind of embrace the characters. Again, the shipping stuff, which gets really nuts. And people kind of project their own feelings onto these characters, which is why I think people get so fiercely defensive about these characters, which, they're fictional characters, but they're written so well and performed so well that you can't help but be moved and inspired by them. And it's almost like people who lust after Sephiroth. This evil, evil man. You've got people who dedicate fan pages to being Sephiroth's lover and wanting to wash his hair and wanting all kinds of crazy stuff to happen. And, I have my preference. I love Tifa. Tifa was my first video game crush. I think she is amazing, but I understand she's a fictional character, But it's kind of funny for them to say that and how, in a sense, these characters kind of become other people's they kind of take on other people's interpretations to a degree, which is really interesting.
Sephiroth holds a special place as one of gaming's most beloved antagonists. Why do you think he resonates with audiences so much?
Because he's damn handsome. He's got great hair and he's mysterious.
Do you think there's any new sides to him that we will see in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
そうです。なぜ彼が今も全世界で悪役として非常に人気があるかっていうと、やっぱりその彼の背景というか、ただの悪役ではなくて、どうしてああいう立ち位置の感情に落ちていったかっていうところが、やっぱり非常に人間味があるというか、プレイヤー目線で見たときに、やっぱ非常に分かりやすくて、気持ちが結構シンクロするところっていうのは、ユーザーに刺さりやすいのと、あと、それとクラウド、ザックス、セフィロス含めて、キャラクターの立ち位置の関係も含めて、非常にいいバランスで、キャラクター設定されているところとかも、やっぱり彼のみんなの記憶に残らせるところのポイントなんだろうなっていうのは、今回作り手としてこのタイトルを見たときには改めて思いました。で、今作では 原作の FF7 のその、セフィロスっていうのは当然当時も私子供心に非常にセフィロスに対してこうなんだろうなこう見えない存在っていうか敵として非常にこうなんだろうこう心には残ってますけど、今回はやっぱこうさらにグラフィックも上がったことでこうなんだろうなその原作の当時では感じれないことができなかった彼のこう感情とかこう思いみたいなのがよりなんかこう自分はすごくこうそれを感じれて、特にこうニブルヘイム回想のところのセフィロスのこう表情一つとってもなんかこうなんだろうなこの炎にこう消えていくすごく有名なシーンだと思うんですけど、あの時のこうセフィロスのこう表情とかがクラウドにこうちょっとこう笑いかけるところとかがこうなんか中にでもちょっと寂しさもありつつもなんかこう強気なこうちょっと強がってるような表情もあるみたいな、なんかああいうのってやっぱりこう今の時代じゃないと表現できない。原作当時は表現できなかったので、そういう意味ではなんか今作ここをもう一回こう作り直せてよかったなっていうのは思いました。
That's really interesting. I don't think I ever really noticed that before. In the Nibelheim scene, you see him obviously kind of smirk at Cloud, and then there's that moment where he just kind of looks away, and there's almost like a sadness there of him fully accepting that crash out, what he's done. He can't come back from what he just did, especially after he learns about his origins to a degree in the basement of the Nibelheim mansion. Yeah, that's actually a really sad moment now that I think about it, because he's accepted it. He's like, oh boy, what's that CJ meme from Grand Theft Auto? Oh shit, here we go again. It's kind of like that for Sephiroth, but this seems to be the end of the play out for a second.
Kitase-san, Hamaguchi-san, thank you so much for joining us today.
ありがとうございます。
Yeah, but Sephiroth is he's like the villain. He's like one of the most iconic villains in gaming. Again, for people who didn't even play Final Fantasy, they know who Sephiroth is. They know he's got the long, gray hair, big old sword. People love him. But for them to be able to expand upon him even more, I love it. I know there are some people who aren't too crazy about what they're doing in 7 Remake and Rebirth, because we see Sephiroth show up so much more now compared to the original, where he only showed up in small bits of the game when you really think about it, and they were really impactful moments. And when Sephiroth would show up, you're like, oh crap, something big is going to go down. I still feel that way in the trilogy. Whenever Sephiroth shows up, something is going to happen. Something of importance to the story is probably going to take place. But as a villain, he was way more mysterious in the original, but I feel like in Remake, even though he's a bad guy, and you don't necessarily side with him necessarily, but you understand why he's mad. You understand what leads to that crash out where he goes sicko mode and he decides to say F Shinra, F this village, I'm gonna murk everybody. And he finds out to a degree what happened to him, where he comes from, and then eventually learning who Genova is, and that's his mom essentially. He kind of has two moms when you think about it. There's Lucrezia, who he actually birthed him, but as far as like his cells and genes, they come from Genova. And I don't know about anyone else, but if you have a healthy relationship with your mom, you would probably mess someone up if they messed with your mom. I would. If anyone messed with my mom, I'm breaking their kneecaps. So you completely understand from a personality standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, why Sephiroth is the way that he is. Again, you're not exactly like, okay, I'm siding with you, but you at least understand from a human standpoint, I get it. I understand why Sephiroth is the way that he is, especially when you learn about him through Crisis Core and parts of, 7 Remake. You really see that he was just a really lonely kid that didn't really have a childhood. All he really knew was Shinra and training and war, and he had two close friends with him, Angeal and Genesis. Angeal being someone who genuinely cared about him, and Genesis was someone who, while he was friends with Sephiroth, it really kind of felt more like Genesis viewed Sephiroth as this goal to surpass. When they're fighting in Crisis Core and he's talking about the world needs a new hero, and I'm going to be that one, not you, Sephiroth. I think maybe that kind of stings Sephiroth a little bit, because someone he trusted and cared about and viewed as a friend maybe didn't view that about him. And they just viewed him as this obstacle that they needed to get past. So, like, I get it. We can all relate to Sephiroth. So that was a pretty fun interview. Nothing too revolutionary there, but just seeing Kitase and Hamaguchi-san just kind of sit down and talk about this stuff and be able to, you know, kind of expand upon it, I think is great. And also doing it in this format is really fun. I get kind of bored of doing the same old with the B-roll and the disembodied voice. That's not going anywhere. I'll still do that. But doing this kind of stuff from time to time is super fun. But with that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of this developer interview with Hamaguchi-san and Yoshinori Kitase-san. Yoshinori Kitase-san. It'd be Kitase-san. You guys get the point. Leave those in the comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.